You know the feeling, right? That constant sniffle, the itch you can't quite scratch, that stuffy nose that just won't go away. We almost always blame one thing: allergies. But what if, for millions of us, that's not the whole story? It turns out the real culprit might be something else entirely, something hiding in plain sight. Let's get into it.
For decades, the playbook has been pretty simple. You feel congested, you reach for an allergy pill. End of story. But a whole bunch of research is now pointing to a completely different cause for so many people who are dealing with chronic sinus problems. So it really makes you wonder, is that stuffy nose that never seems to leave you alone really an allergy?
Okay, to really understand what's going on, we have to meet the main character in the classic allergy story. It's a chemical called histamine. Now think of histamine as your body's super sensitive, maybe a little overeager fire alarm. It's meant to warn your immune system about real threats, but sometimes it goes off when you're just making toast.
So what is this stuff exactly? Well, histamine is a compound your cells release when they think there's trouble. Like an injury, or in the case of allergies, something totally harmless, like a bit of pollen. It's basically the chemical messenger that hits the big red button to kick off inflammation. And that's what brings on all those classic symptoms we know and definitely don't love. And you know what's wild? You can actually see histamine working. Scientists call it the triple response of Lewis. First, you get a red spot where your tiny blood vessels widen. Then, a raised bump, they call it a wheal, pops up as fluid leaks out. And finally, a red flare spreads around the whole area. Honestly, if you've ever had a mosquito bite, you've seen this triple response in action.
So it makes sense, right? If histamine is the alarm that's blaring, the logical solution would be to shut it off. And that brings us to the hero of the allergy story. Or so we thought, antihistamines. They're designed to be the snooze button for that hyperactive histamine alarm.
But, not all snooze buttons are created equal. The first antihistamines that came out were effective, sure, but they had this annoying habit of crossing the blood-brain barrier, and that's exactly why they made you so drowsy. The real game changer was the second generation. These newer drugs were designed to be way more targeted, stopping the reaction without making you feel like you need a 3-hour nap. And you can see this science right on your local pharmacy shelf. We're talking about names like fexofenadine, loratadine, and cetirizine. These are the powerhouses behind a ton of popular non-drowsy allergy meds. They're targeted, they last a long time, and they have way fewer side effects. So problem solved, right? Well, maybe not for everyone. And this is where our whole story takes a really sharp turn. What happens when you take these amazing, advanced, non-drowsy allergy pills and absolutely nothing changes? You're still congested. You're still miserable. This right here is the mystery of chronic sinusitis, and it's a frustrating reality for millions of people. Now, let's be really clear about what we're talking about here. This is not your average case of the springtime sniffles. Chronic rhinosinusitis, or CRS for short, is officially defined as persistent inflammation of your nasal lining that lasts for more than 3 months. It's this stubborn, annoying condition that just doesn't seem to respond to the usual allergy treatments. So, totally frustrated by this puzzle, researchers at the famous Mayo Clinic decided to look for a completely different culprit. They started analyzing the mucus from patients with chronic sinusitis, and they found something totally unexpected. Something that, it turns out, was hiding in plain sight the entire time. And here it is. This one quote from their 1999 paper basically changed everything. The researchers concluded that chronic sinusitis wasn't really about a classic allergic reaction at all. No, it was an immune response to fungus in the nose. And the whole reaction was being driven by a completely different kind of immune cell, the eosinophil. Okay, so you might be thinking, was this just a fluke? Something weird happening with one group of patients? Well, researchers in Graz, Austria decided to put that theory to the test. And the results they got back were absolutely stunning. They found positive fungal cultures in the mucus of 92.1% of their chronic sinusitis patients. This wasn't a fluke. This was a fundamental discovery. So here's the big takeaway. For a massive number of people dealing with these chronic sinus issues, the problem isn't a true allergy. It's a totally different immune process that just happens to look and feel a lot like one. So how does it actually work? So here's the deal. Pretty much everyone has some harmless fungi living in their nasal mucus. It's normal. But in people with this condition, an immune cell called the eosinophil goes on a full-blown attack. Think of it like a security guard that doesn't just kick a loiterer out of the building, but instead blows up the entire lobby to get the job done.
These eosinophils release toxic proteins that, yeah, they kill the fungus, but they also cause massive collateral damage to your own nasal lining, and that's what leads to all the inflammation.
This slide right here really clarifies the difference. A true allergy is driven by something called IgE antibodies, and they're responding to allergens like pollen or dust. But in what's now called eosinophilic fungal rhinosinusitis, or EFRS, the key player is a totally different cell, the eosinophil, and its target is fungus. We're talking two completely different pathways, two different causes, but with very, very similar and miserable symptoms.
So why does all of this really matter? Well, because you can't fix a problem if you don't even know what's causing it. Using the wrong tool for the job isn't just going to be ineffective. It can lead to years and years of unnecessary frustration and discomfort. And this table right here, this is your key takeaway. For classic allergic rhinitis, antihistamines make perfect sense. They silence that histamine alarm. But for chronic sinusitis that's actually driven by this eosinophil response to fungi, you need a completely different approach, one that actually addresses the root immune reaction and the fungus itself. So, the next time you're reaching for an allergy pill for that stuffy nose that just will not quit, maybe it's worth asking yourself, what if my body isn't sounding a false alarm about pollen? What if it's actually fighting the wrong battle about a harmless fungus? Could the real cause of your chronic symptoms be hiding in plain sight?